Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome and good morning to the Sustainable Seafood Futures Forum 2019. It is great to see so many familiar faces here in the room today. My name is Camille Diggs. I'm the Regional Director for the MSC in Europe. And before introducing our speakers and our agenda of the day, just a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, today's forum is not just here in this room, it's also recorded and streamlined live, so welcome to the people online as well. And you're welcome to take part in the online discussion. We have a team that can answer questions per Twitter, and you can do that at Seafood Futures, hashtag Seafood Futures with a capital S and a capital F. If you want Wi-Fi here in the room, we have the free Wi-Fi from the Seafood Conference. It's free Wi-Fi seafood. And if you have questions, I please ask you to wait with asking those for the last 20 minutes. We have a question session. If some of the questions cannot be asked here in the forum today, then you can always come to our booth. It's in Hall 7, stand 1553. Finally, if the alarm sounds, you will find the emergency exit on your right. There's no alarm planned, I understand, so we hope that that is not necessary. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first speaker of the day. You all know him probably. Over to Rupert House, CEO of the MSC. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It is a real pleasure to be back here in this auditorium and to welcome you to MSC's Seafood Futures Forum. As Camille has mentioned, there is registration and people here in the room, and I think another 300 or so registered online. And like last year, we've looked at the sort of delegates, and it's a mixture of harvesters, processors, retail, food service, NGOs, some government, some scientists, some students, and some academics. And I think, again, that reflects MSC's broad church of stakeholders and engaged partners. So thank you all for being here before the show opens. Well, last year, I think we pretty much concluded that our oceans are in trouble. The resilience, productivity of our marine ecosystems are being undermined and under threat from the impacts of global climate change, overfishing, and pollution. 1 year on, sadly, the global trends are still moving in the wrong direction. We're set to live in a warmer, more crowded world with increased frequency and severity of extreme weather events and rising sea levels. The prospects for coral reefs are particularly worrying. Last year in Incheon in South Korea, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, issued a special report for policymakers that urged that urgent action be undertaken to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. They concluded, and this is sort of 6,000 scientific references, 90 authors from 40 countries. The report was commissioned coming out of the Paris Climate Agreement. The report concluded it is technically feasible to limit warming at 1.5 degrees, but in the word of the report, it said rapid, far-reaching and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society are needed, not least deep emission cuts, net zero carbon by 2050, but it is possible. For coral reefs, even at a 1.5 degree warming world, a further 70 to 90% are anticipated to be lost. At 2 degrees, it's 99 to 100% of our coral reefs will be gone. And worryingly, even if all of the commitments agreed in Paris are delivered, we're heading for a 3 degree warmer world. So needless to say, there is a huge challenge there to address that mega trend of climate change. However, there are also reasons to be optimistic and hopeful. And although the UN Sophia's latest report indicates that there's been a threefold increase in overfishing over the last 40 years, if you actually look at the detail, there's been huge improvement and recovery of stocks. In the USA, for example, the number of stocks classified as overexploited is at record lows. In the Northeast Atlantic, overexploited stocks have gone from 70% to 40%. And there's been similar stories of success in New Zealand, Australia, and elsewhere in the world. So without doubt, the challenge of overfishing can be fixed. We know what the problems are, and we know what the solutions are. However, stocks in the global south and the developing world are still under threat, and stock health is deteriorating. So it's clear, given the importance of this region, 73% of our seafood comes from this region, that more attention needs to be focused there. Other reasons to be optimistic. I mentioned this last year, and I'm a great fan of the Sustainable Development Goal framework. It is quite phenomenal if you actually look at the detail. 193 countries have signed up to humanity's framework and plan to protect the planet, end poverty, and deliver prosperity. And I have no doubt the Dedicated Oceans Goal, SDG 14, is galvanizing new partnerships, focusing attention, and unlocking new resources to tackle some of the biggest problems the oceans face. One particular initiative I'd like to mention is the Stockholm Resilience Centre's SeaBOS initiative, Seafood Businesses for Ocean Stewardship. Quite remarkable. Stockholm Resilience Centre have pulled together, I think, 10 of the biggest seafood companies in the world. These companies are determined to work on transforming the global seafood industry. They're aligning their sustainability policies, sustainable procurement, committed to eradicating modern-day slavery, ensuring their seafood is fully traceable, and also to get involved in the public policy process to encourage more ambitious public policy development to create the sort of conditions that we need to enable fisheries to thrive sustainably. We also have a high-level panel for ocean sustainability with 14 heads of state. And again, this has been convened to raise ambition and catalyze action to tackle the problems our oceans face. The World Economic Forum have their Friends for Ocean Action. And as I mentioned last year, there is a plethora of ocean conferences attracting more and more attention. And this slide is showing that Our Ocean conferences that were kicked off by John Kerry, I think in 2014, have now attracted over 1,500 commitments that have unlocked $26 billion of funding to tackle the problems our oceans face. So there is reasons to be optimistic despite some of the trends we're dealing with. 26 billion is a huge amount of money. I was at the latest Our Oceans event last year in Bali and announced MSC's Ocean Stewardship Fund. This is an initiative to provide funding to enable small-scale developing world fisheries on their transition to sustainability. £1 million is clearly not a huge sum of money, but we're very much hoping to leverage and attract other foundation funding and perhaps government funding so we can utilize MSC's 20 years of experience in helping to facilitate and encourage more fisheries to improve their level of performance. This fund isn't quite launched yet. It will be later this year, and it will also be available to fund or part fund new scientific analysis that might help fisheries overcome some of the obstacles they face to achieve certification. It's important to remember that MSC has actually been engaged in outreach and developing world fisheries from the outset. Dr. Yemi Oloruntui, one of the panelists we'll hear from shortly, has been with the MSC program even longer than me, actually, I think 16 or 17 years. And over that time, we've developed tools and methodologies to improve access, and we now have, I think, 68 certified or under full assessment fisheries from the global south. And they're landing about 2 million metric tons of seafood. And the fishery that's represented in this slide, the South African hake, really to me demonstrates that a market-based program can be applicable anywhere in the world. When this fishery entered assessment, there was some controversy, and actually through the process it was discovered there wasn't one stock of hake, there were two. One was overfished. There were significant interactions with seabirds. I think 10,000 birds were being killed. And through their engagement in the MSC process with local partners, WWF, South Africa, and others, with the government regulator, this fishery fixed all of the problems. They achieved certification. They reduced bycatch of birds by 99%. And the Deep Sea Trawlers Association of South Africa commissioned independent economic research that said the fishery Net present value was much higher because of MSC certification. New exports markets had been won, and importantly, 12,000 much-needed processing jobs were more secure. So in a way, that to me personifies what MSC is trying to do. It's a win-win for the environment in terms of reduced impact. It's a win-win for consumers, sustainable seafood supplies into the future, and clearly a win for the environment as well. So I hasten to say MSC is obviously just one tool in the toolbox, and given those global trends, the SDG framework has targets to be delivered in 2020 and more targets by 2030. We clearly need to do an awful lot more to accelerate progress and scale workable solutions. So I'm particularly looking forward to hearing the panel discussion to get their insights and ideas on what we all can collectively do, because we need governments, we need markets, we need consumers, we need leadership from the commercial sector. But before we have the panel, I'm going to hand over to Nicolas Guichou, MSC's Chief Programme Officer, who will give you an overview of MSC's activities over this last year and really what's been achieved through your engagement and leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Rupert. The continuing trend I should change the slides first. The continuing trend of increasing overfishing in the developing world is of a huge concern to us all. Reliance on importing seafood from the developing world, but also increasing local domestic consumption has led to overfishing. With 3/4 of the global catch in the global south, it's easy to understand that this area is a priority. Clearly, to have any chance to meet the SDGs on time, we need to accelerate the transformation of the fishing sector. And this can't only be European or North American. The MSC is one tool to help deliver the SDG 14. Data from MSC fishery assessments is used by the UN Environment Programme to track progress towards international goals to help end overfishing and protect the biodiversity. MSC certification is now an official indicator for two key targets, part of the Global Biodiversity Indicator Partnership. We also provide data to the recently launched IUU Fishing Index. So the increasing number of fisheries achieving certification to the MSC standards in the developed world is positive news, along with the trends for wild fish stocks in North America, Europe, and Australia, New Zealand, highlighted in the FAO Sophia Report that Rupert just quoted. However, one of the key messages from the last year's Seafood Forum was that MSC can't do this alone, obviously. Progress can only be made with the full participation of the fisheries themselves. This is quite obvious, but also with the fishing managers, governments, and others. Fortunately, over the past 20 years, we've seen the fantastic growth of the wider sustainable seafood movement. The sustainable seafood movement was initiated, initially focused on wild-caught seafood following the release of the FAO Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries and the creation of MSC, and has now evolved to take account of aquaculture with the apparition of ASC as well. It's seen a proliferation of certifications and rating schemes aimed at informing the market and consumers about the sustainability of the seafood they buy. Well-known rating schemes like Monterey Bay Aquarium or WWF, which assess as many seafood sources as possible, can work alongside certification schemes which directly engage with fisheries and or farms and require them to reach a verified level of performance. The MSC provides a framework to define environmental sustainability and give tangible targets to aim for. Fisheries started to make improvements to meet the MSC framework and then get certified. But certification is quite a high bar for many fisheries. So organizations focusing on improvement appeared, such as the Sustainable Fishery Partnership and well-known environmental NGOs such as WWF, Nature Conservancy, TNC, or, for example, Conservation International. I could have named many more, which have developed fishery and aquaculture improvement projects. And more focus is being put on the social aspect of sustainability in the recent years. So this is what really constitutes today the sustainable seafood movement. But in the global south, certifications such as MSC can be often mid or long-term goal for most fisheries. So what should the MSC really do, and what role should it be? The MSC has engaged with fisheries in the Global South since inception. Our global accessibility team is now 25 staff with a budget of £250,000 to continue this mission. As part of this initiative, I've developed benchmarking tools and tools for fisheries with limited data. We are conducting research to see if we can make the fishery standard better to use with small-scale fisheries. And as Rupert mentioned, last year we launched the £1 million MSC Ocean Stewardship Fund. Soon we will also pilot a new tool called In Transition to MSC. The MSC will provide funding to fisheries that are in fisheries improvement projects working towards MSC certification. Our ITM program will give fisheries greater reassurance about their chance of certification, and hopefully, we have to see that, reduce the cost of assessment by reducing the amount of time spent by CABs on the evaluation. And as you can see on the slide, all those projects are done in collaboration with partners such as funders, governments, local or international NGOs, and fishery experts, who are critical for all stages of the pathway. So far, we're working directly on 19 projects in 32 countries to map and evaluate the sustainability of their fisheries. On top of that, we've raised almost €2 million in the last 3 years for projects to map and assess fisheries in the Mediterranean, in West Africa, and Southern Africa, from a variety of funders like MAVA Foundation, Adesium, Levantis, WF Sweden, and the GIZ in Germany. Funds from these grants also support a number of partners, including WF Spain and France, Blue Ventures, and Rompao. We raised a further €1.8 million for the Fish for Good project, where we are working to map fisheries in Mexico, Indonesia, and South Africa. Here, our partners are ProNatura in Mexico and WWF South Africa. But our role actually goes beyond this. We also have a capacity building program aimed at equipping and educating stakeholders such as NGOs or governments who want to use the MSC standard for their own improvement projects. In the last 2 years, we have carried out workshops all around the world, reaching 370 stakeholders that have been fully trained for several days. Through this project, the MSC has the opportunity to bring 20 years of experience of work on sustainable fishing to benefit the fisheries not yet ready for MSC. This is a new role for MSC that is complementary to what other NGOs currently do. So let's go back to fishery certification and sustainable seafood markets to look at the development over the past 12 months. We have witnessed this year, again, great progress in the number of fisheries engaged in the program. Tropical tuna and Russian salmon from the Far East dominated the trend this year, with respectively 10 and 11 fisheries certified, but many other species were part of the mix. Haddock, lobster, sardines, herring, sprat, shrimp, hoki, blueling, whiting, pollock, redfish, squid, and the first Italian fishery, the iconic vongole clam in the Adriatic Sea. Today, this represents 15% of global marine catch, or 13 million tons of seafood landed. So we also see a greater number of fisheries being recertified, 48 last year, and when 24 were suspended or withdrew from the program. Reaching certifications often requires hard work and collaboration with various actors over many years. I chose this year 2 examples of such collaboration. The first example is of a fishery certified in 2017 that has undertaken new research, which ultimately led to new marine protected area. The West Greenland continental shelf extends well inside the Arctic Circle. It is home to a diverse array of marine creatures, including cold water corals and sponges. When the Greenland cold water prawn fishery first entered MSC assessment, the auditors noted that little was known about the seafloor of the fishery. So as part of the certification, the fishers worked with the Zoological Society of London. The team began mapping the seabed by lowering cameras from the fisheries survey vessels. These revealed 600 seafloor organisms and very fragile habitats. In response, the fishery adapted its gear to raise it off the seabed to reduce damage to a delicate invertebrate called a Seapen. If you've never seen a Seapen, that's what it is. I discovered that last week, I have to say. They also created a marine protected area equivalent to 1,900 square meters, and they will continue with annual camera surveys and funding for PhD projects. Another great example to show how partnerships work to accelerate improvement is the certification of the Bahamas spiny lobster, another first for that region. Since 2009, WWF, the Bahamas government, and the Nature Conservancy have been working with this fishery. Through a fishery improvement project, their efforts have been aimed at helping the fishery meet the MSC standard. Several of WWF US corporate partners provided support and engaged suppliers, government officials, and other stakeholders. The project achieved several important goals, including conducting a peer-reviewed stock assessment, establishing a management system to monitor the health of the lobster stock, establishing a public forum for stakeholders to participate in the management of the fishery, and introducing a zero-tolerance policy for undersized lobster. And now that this fishery is certified, it will still get incentives to improve in order to maintain its certification. Indeed, certification against the MSC standard is generating continuous incremental improvements. In June last year, we published an analysis of fisheries performance at recertification. These fisheries, 27 in total, had quite high scores at assessment. Despite this certification, as the slide shows, these fisheries improved even more by the time of the reassessment, in many cases scoring above 90 across the MSC standard. Even when certified, fisheries keep raising their performance. And let's look for a concrete example of what fisheries have done to reduce bycatch. The graph on the right shows the number of improvements made and which type of species they protected. For example, the entire fleet of Lofoten cod fishers in Norway modified their gear and introduced a minimum catch size of 60 centimeters, allowing smaller fish to grow and reproduce. Other fisheries have implemented exclusion devices, like the Suriname sea bob fishery, which uses turtle exclusion devices. Version 2.0 of the MSC standard contains even stronger protection. And as fisheries move to this version, they will have to review the practices and, where possible, adapt measures to further reduce bycatch. And we've seen fisheries also see new conditions to strengthen management of vulnerable marine ecosystem. Looking forward, we have now started our next review of the fisheries standard. The focus of this review is to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of assessments and reflect improve scientific understanding and best practice. We are currently reviewing several requirements related to endangered, threatened, and protected species and measures to improve the suitability of the standard for fisheries in the developing world. At the same time, we are reviewing our assurance model as part of our program, which defines and ensures impartiality, credibility, and confidence in the way that the MSC standard is applied. This year, we launched a new streamlined fishery assessment process, which front-loads opportunities to meaningful stakeholder input and should result in more robust assessment reports. And we also extended provision to address forced labor and child labor in fisheries and supply chains, and we're exploring opportunities for further partnerships with existing social standards. Now over to the market. There are now more than 37,000 products carrying the MSC label in more than 100 countries. This represents around 970,000 metric tons of labeled seafood, and I think we will celebrate the 1 million tons mark very, very soon. In terms of growth at country level, the powerhouses of Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and UK, Ireland remain the most important in volume of MSC labeled product. But France is now fourth after almost doubling in just 12 months. Not surprisingly, the fastest growth is coming from South Europe and Northeast Asia, parts of the world with very, very high levels of seafood consumption, and those that we actually have prioritized in our last strategic plan, so good news for us. But we have witnessed a very strong growth in Italy over the past 2 years. In 2017, the number of MSC labeled products in Italy quadrupled, and last year it went up by 70%. Why? It started with the commitment of leading frozen food brand Findus to systematically use the MSC label on certified products and a great joint marketing promotion with MSC. Both leading frozen brands, Frosta and Findus, are now using the key sustainability messages in their mainstream consumers campaign. Rio Mare, the leading tuna brand in Italy, then follow suit and have now about 20 SKUs carrying the label. Retailers like Carrefour, Lidl, and Conad are also introducing new products. So that's all explain this growth on the Italian market. But to support this effort, during World Ocean Day, we organized an event aimed at Italian consumers. We filled the skies of Milan with flying fish. The message was then that even in a city, we can do a lot for oceans by eating sustainable seafood. The campaign achieved excellent social media and national press coverage. But as you know, the MSC is international. We're now covering more than 30 countries where we are proactive. So I would like to show you a short video capturing just a fraction of the activities that consumers saw during our 20th anniversary campaign last year. So one of those campaigns happened in the Netherlands, and in that country, for the second time, the MSC Blue Label was being ranked as one of the top sustainable food labels in the Netherlands. So a benchmarking study carried out by Milieu Centraal on behalf of the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality reviewed almost 100 eco-labels. Only 10 were awarded the title Top Eco-Label, with the MSC getting full marks for credibility and transparency. So to conclude, the sustainable seafood movement has evolved considerably. As a collective, we should all be very proud. The MSC has grown into a proven concept, but continues to evolve. It now provides a platform to influence change on a broader level. We have committed to do this while working with all stakeholders, navigating different perspectives. This is difficult work, but we are all embracing the challenge. Fisheries, aquaculture, government, industry, conservation, and science all have a role to play. This is a problem we can solve, as Rupert mentioned earlier, and everyone actually has a role to play. So I'd like now to hand over to our panel moderator, Dr. Stephen Hall, an expert in organizational change and former director of World Fish in Malaysia. Before introducing our panel, Stephen will share with you the results of an online event hosted last November by research and insights company Globescan, Nomad Foods, and the MSC, involving more than 225 seafood industry professionals and thought leaders. A report on the collective perspective has been published today, and we have a few copies here of the press for anyone who would like one. So welcome, Stephen. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. This event gets slicker and slicker. You know, I see the timing and it's like to the second, which puts enormous pressure on me now. But I'll do my best. Thank you very much, Nicholas, for a great introduction to the challenge that we have before us. My job here now is to simply provide you with a little bit more context before we introduce a very distinguished panel to discuss this issue more fully. And that panel comes with a variety of perspectives, as you will hear, and I think that the richness of those perspectives, I hope, will inform you in your thinking and contribute to your takeaways from what is undoubtedly a tremendous challenge. And it's a challenge that's clearly framed, as Rupert very eloquently said, from the Sustainable Development Goals, which, you know, we've got 10 years left. We're seeing a degree of increase in commitment, but there's very, very strong sense that there's an awful lot more to be done. And for the goal that we are most engaged with in this room, I think one of the real worries will come in a moment. As Nicholas foreshadowed, what I want to do is summarize the outcomes of an effort between the Marine Stewardship Council, Nomad Foods, and Globescan, the global consultancy that works to try and bring these expert perspectives together to address the progress that's being made through their SDG Leadership Forum for the one goal that we're particularly concerned with, life underwater. This forms part of an SDG leadership series which is asking these questions of all of the SDGs. They're about halfway through them right now, and I want to share with you some of the perspectives from that, particularly important because if you actually ask the experts who's making progress where, the sad reflection on us is that we're bottom of the list. The general conclusion is, of all of the goals that there are in front of us, the one that is making the least progress, albeit a little more than previously, concerns life underwater. Now, as Nicholas said, the results of this report are hot off the press. There is a little preview of it on by your seats. And that is available for download, and we'll be giving you the links to that a little bit later on. The messages that emerge from it, or some of the key messages, are as follows. The first one concerns the differing perspectives of the professionals and the lay people. As, again, Rupert emphasized, for most of us who kind of have a perspective on this from a professional setting, climate change is head and shoulders above everything else as the overarching concern that we seek to address. Second, amongst professionals, was the notion of pollution, and the third was overfishing, the one that we actually can concretely do something about in this particular forum with this particular constituency. Interestingly, and in contrast, for the consumers of the world, it was pollution of the oceans that was the top of the list. Perhaps driven by the very, very prominent emphasis placed recently on plastics. The BBC documentary with David Attenborough was a key moment in that. But that and overfishing are the two that become top of the list for them. Interestingly, the effects of climate change is somewhat lower, although ocean acidification was also identified as a key point, and of course that is a driver driven by climate change. So there's perhaps a question, again, about communication and understanding the issues that we have a job to do with. But different perspectives. When asked which organisations are contributing most to making a difference, the NGO community and advocacy groups far and away the most well-regarded in that respect, but interestingly the certification organisations come second, followed by the larger companies and then national governments. I would contend, and I think it's a challenge for us, that if we really want to make a difference, those bars should all be about the same, because it's only then that we're actually working together to actually achieve the objectives and meet the challenges that we're facing. There were three basic themes that emerged from the consultation. The first one, as I said, is that while consumers were most concerned about pollution, experts worry about climate change. There's the need for a really common language to cut through the noise and try and make clear the messages that need to be understood. But there was also a recognition that while working with consumers was important and getting the messages through to them, there was a whole other constituency that has to be engaged in. In particular, governments came through very strongly as a key constituency that we need to work with much more effectively. The second message that came through concerned this problem that nobody owns the oceans. The tragedy of the commons is a well-trodden phrase, but it's one that's very apposite in the context of this discussion. The transboundary nature is clearly problematic for us, and that this contribution by NGOs and advocacy groups followed by certification bodies were key drivers of the improvements that we are managing to achieve, but yet again, the lack of engagement perceived by this constituency of government was notable, yet the identification of multi-stakeholder partnerships, which include government, was recognised as a key to achieving progress. The third theme that emerged concerns the importance of the Global South, again foreshadowed by Nicholas's presentation. 81% of respondents felt that the pressure that was being placed on the Global South to provide seafood was really causing quite significant problems. But then there was a paradox. And the paradox was that there was a real sense that there was a need to increase the bar and the standard for sustainability that the MSC and others represented, while at the same time recognising that for many that was simply out of reach. And I would contend that finding a way through that paradox is one of the challenges that we face to achieve the kinds of scale of improvement in fisheries and in the seafood system that we need. And that's something I hope we'll return to with the panel. The overarching theme, however, and it's one that you'll see is consistent not just in this dialogue, but also in others for the other SDGs, concerns the importance of engagement across organisational boundaries, both geographic, both institutional, and in terms of the sectoral interests. Interestingly, the dialogues for the other SDGs, one spoke specifically about collaboration, and indeed partnerships for the goals is indeed one of the goals. You know, there's recommended this report for breaking down that issue of collaboration more clearly, but the successful collaboration does depend on that long-term vision and picture of what we're trying to achieve. And the Industry and Innovation and Infrastructure group talked very strongly about the importance of collaboration in the process and the trust building that's required to do that. I think they're common messages that, again, I'm sure we will return to in the panel discussion. One other interesting conclusion from the other panels that have also been run right now was this one. This was from the good health and well-being goal, and it concerned the need for a new generation of leaders to emerge to actually tackle this problem. I don't think that means that the grey hairs and the lack of hair people in this room can afford to walk away from the problem and simply wait for the next generation. But I think it is interesting that Greta Thunberg and many other school children and others are emerging in a leadership space here that's filling a vacuum that maybe we've allowed to occur. A very interesting perspective, and one that we might want to think about later. The final slide in this presentation is one that I think captures and summarizes the essence of that dialogue in that report, that takes those three kind of key issues that emerge when we think about SDG 14, talks about the barriers to progress, and then thinks about the levers to accelerate progress subsequently. And I'm going to leave that slide up as a kind of aide-memoire for our conversation a little bit later. I'm not going to say any more about the report per se. I'd like to take this opportunity now to introduce you to the panel and ask them to come and join me on the stage so I can stop talking and they can start. We have a very distinguished panel. I'd like to start. Gerhard, if you'd like to join us, please. Gerhard Zölliter is from the Coop in Switzerland. He comes with a very strong background in fisheries, and indeed was one of the very earliest instigators of the MSC during his engagement with Unilever many years ago. Dr. Yemi Olorentuyi is well known to many of you. Yemi is the accessibility manager for the MSC. Again, as we've already heard, a very long-standing member of the organization, and one that comes with a great many perspectives to offer. Professor Do-Hoon Kim. Do-Hoon is a professor of fisheries in Korea. He comes with a wealth of experience in an area of the world and in a market that clearly is one that is a priority for us, and we're delighted to have him here today. Francisco Lyotta from Thai Union. Francisco is a lively character, I think I would describe him as, and I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say from a private sector perspective. So don't let me down, right? Barbara Yanker from the co-conveners of this forum, the Aquaculture Stewardship Council. I'm very interested to hear the parallels that we might see between the challenges that the MSC faces and those that the ASC faces as another certifying body. And finally, Pedro Ferreira, who is from a very important organisation and partner for the Marine Stewardship Council, the Sustainable Fisheries Partnership, involved in the fisheries improvement space. Gentlemen, ladies, thank you very much for joining me. This is where I get to be Michael Parkinson or some other kind of chat show host, and start to frame some questions for you. And you never ever do that now, I've noticed, from the BBC presenters without having your iPad in front of you. I'd like to... We heard, Siri is not available. I knew that. Which is a bit of a disappointment, really. We heard from Rupert and Nicholas that the MSC has been doing an awful lot, and it's undoubtedly, there's undoubtedly lots to celebrate. Yet that globe scan analysis shows clearly that progress with the SDG 14 leaves something to be desired, to say the least. So asking how we can accelerate progress with that is clearly timely. And for us, overfishing is clearly the question in front of us. That key message about the critical importance of multi-stakeholder partnerships for making progress is clear, and we've seen and heard from Nicholas and Rupert some of the steps that the MSC has been making in that respect to widen engagement and partnership. I'd like to get some initial reaction from the panel around the issues that have emerged, and I'd like to start with you, Barbara. The ASC is another standard setter. It's a co-sponsor of this forum. How are you evolving to address these issues, and are there parallels with what you heard from Nicholas and Rupert?
Yes, there's a lot that we can relate to, or I can relate to, on behalf of ASC. And what I think was a strong message is that we need to collaborate. So the issue is such a big one that we really kind of like need partnerships in order to achieve this big goal. And I think that, yes, on one hand, you need sustainable fisheries, but responsible aquaculture needs to play an important role here as well. And one specific arena where MSC and ASC where we are working together is in terms of feed, because feed is the natural linkage between the wild catch fisheries and aquaculture. While fish meal and fish oil nowadays only account for a minor percentage of the whole feed, still the forage fisheries are a big subset of the whole fishery industry. And we have seen in the past that especially this part of the fishery, it was challenging to reach out to them and to have an incentive for them to become more sustainable. And I do think that via aquaculture and responsible aquaculture and the ASC and certification schemes, and specifically also the feed standard that we are planning to launch soon, that we can create a leverage in order to reach that subset of the industry as well. And I think what's important here to mention is that, yes, MSC is the ultimate goal here, that we all need to work towards too. But as we also heard, it's quite a high standard and difficult to reach for fisheries in some parts of the world. So that's why we need to work on kind of like an improvement ladder and a stepwise approach in order to really get as many fisheries in the program and don't kind of, make it really accessible. And I think that's important. I do know that, talking to consumers as a marketeer, it would be nice to say, okay, 100% MSC right from the start. But as a kind of like vision-driven organization, we really need to think, okay, how can we make the biggest impact? And the biggest impact is really kind of like in the sense that we bring more fisheries in and work together with them to reach a high bar of sustainability.
Okay, thank you. Pedro, Francisco, from your private sector perspective, what have your experiences been in this issue of partnering to achieve sustainability, and what conclusions would you draw from those experiences?
Well, for us, obviously the way the tools that the MSC has provided us to work and to manage to gather all the stakeholders around one common goal, which is improving the stability of the fisheries, and to try to get all the raw material we source fully sustainable. I would perhaps go back a little bit and give you a short context about Thai Union and what Thai Union is doing. So Thai Union is a very large seafood processor. And we've started a program called the Sea Change, which is based on 4 pillars: safe and legal work, people and communities, responsible operations, which has to do with manufacturing, and responsible sourcing. So I'm particularly dealing on the responsible sourcing side. And what we do is we try to implement as many fishery improvement projects aiming at improving the standard of the fishery so that they will eventually get to the MSC certification. This for us is, the challenge, you've given us a very short time to talk about this. I could entertain a day-long conversation around FIPS, but for me, what I would like to highlight is that we've effectively been able to gather coastal states, processors, producers around one table and provide a very efficient forum to discuss issues that are extremely important to get to the point where we would eventually enter the full assessment and get the fishery certified. Thai Union has made a huge commitment. We said we will try to get 100% of our branded products coming from either MSC or FIP fisheries. I'm very happy to say that For the European market, we've reached 96%, which is massive. In fact, for the MSC products themselves, we've managed to get from 5% to 26% overall in a period of 4 years, which is remarkable. Overall, as a group, we're now up to, on the MSC products, up to 19%. So, and this comes to show how committed we are and how we perceive MSC to being, you know, the tool, the robustness, the credibility that will lead us to help, you know, managing the oceans. Thai Union, we do not own vessels. We did in the past, a very small number of vessels, but we sold that part of the business. But we work with suppliers. Now, we want to consider these suppliers as being partners, not just suppliers. And this is why it is so important to work with them, not only on the sustainability side, but also on the social side. We have a very robust code of conduct for all our suppliers that they need to adhere to. So coming back to your question, MSC is a fantastic tool for us to operate. It gives us the platform, and it's you know, the results that we have achieved so far are very, very promising.
Thank you. I think we'll come back to this issue of how the MSC and the ASC and their standard can help facilitate that improvement, you know, more broadly as we get through this conversation. But before going there, Gerhard, your role as in the industry, I think, complements and extends the one that Francisco's just been talking about. What are your key takeaways from this issue?
I'm very impressed to hear what Thai Union is doing, because this is something which we as a retailer look for in our supply partners, and the word is partners in this instance. I think there's three issues which are important when you look at the marketing of fish and seafood, which is sustainable. The one is the big marketeers need to do a commitment, a public commitment to what they want to do, where they want to stand, and that they want to be sustainable. I think that is most important. Then they need to follow up on this by choosing their partners in a reliable fashion on a long-term basis, not jumping backwards and forwards between buyers on a price, between sellers on a price basis, but trying to work together to improve the situation. And the third condition which I can see is that to get fisheries and aquaculture organizations as well into a more sustainable mode is you bring them in at an early stage, you give a commitment to those organizations, and then you will follow up on that one by supporting the fisheries through buying, through the benefits of actively sourcing out of fisheries or aquaculture organizations. I think that is the key behind it. There's no use in going for a certification without having the commitment of somebody who wants your product and who wants it at a fair price. In limbo, you don't do anything really. The problem is really having somebody who says, yes, we're standing behind you, we will be with you all the way. As long as you make progress, we will support you. And we know that, I mean, the American example with the lobsters was a very encouraging project. We have been since many years, too long for our liking, but it's coming to something. In a long-standing FIP, other FIPs have just been initiated with the support of the marketing side and the fisheries, and I think that is the progress which we're looking for. We need to get the engagement of everybody in the progress, and not just the fisheries or the governments, but we need the marketing side in it. Governments cannot do much in this respect. It's the consumers who need to be offered the products, and that means that the marketing side needs to really stand up and say, we go for it, we want it, and change is what we will facilitate.
So you see that market engagement piece as a key driver in driving that demand for certified product, that investment in engaging with markets?
the commitment is something which is vital. The consumer does not come on its own and says, I want sustainable seafood. I think that would be asked too much. The MSC and the ASC does a lot to inform consumers about sustainability subjects. There's a lot of press about various aspects in relation to sustainable developments, not only in the fish and seafood, but in general life. But the key seems to me to get the commitment from the marketing sector to say, yes,
right,
we are going to stand behind it 100%, and we will follow up on it, and we will be controlled in what we do. I think the outside control is very important, that NGOs take a stand and say, look, we're going to partner in a new FIP. We're going to partner with the marketing side on their drive towards sustainability. And we're going to verify that everything is going according to the plan, according to the target. And the NGOs I'm talking about are not necessarily NGOs which are standard givers. So the MSC will not control. The MSC will be controlled, but marketing organizations need to be controlled from the outside to be believable in what they do. You cannot just say, I will, and then leave it at that and hope that everything goes well. Somebody needs to go out and say, yes, they do actually, and we stand for it with our good name, whoever that organization is. And we have a lot of people here in the panel who would do the job. Other people who are not up here sitting in the audience who will do exactly that job. And I think I would call for especially retailers around the globe to take a stand on this one and say, yes, we will. We're going to be part of this movement, and we will set a target. Let's say in 5 years we will be 100% sustainable if they are not sustainable yet, something like it. But they need to be vocal on this one, I think.
Thank you. Pedro, what are your key takeaways of this as a fisheries improvement organization?
I was hearing Gerhard, and that's true what he says about the need of having a third part that work with the retailers and with the supply chain. But I think for an NGO like us and for the entire movement, we might take a step back and have a look at the big picture and be more strategic and prioritize as well, because we are using the market to influence and to change the behavior of an entire industry. And if we want to do that, we need to be strategic, because we are going to be using resources and putting effort and time and on doing that. And I'm going to do an analogy, if you allow me to do that. If we were tasked to improve the health of an entire population by using sports and exercise, I guess no one will invest on having a program to get Olympic champions. I guess the logic thing will be investing on having facilities for children at the school to do sports, for elder people, for every single layer of the society to do exercise, because this is a healthy habit and it will change their behavior. And here I think we should do the same. We should take a look at the big picture, see which are these markets we are using, which are the key fisheries they are sourcing from, and which are the fisheries that will create more change and have a greater impact. And if I can also give you an example of that, is that right now there are, I guess, 4, 5, or 6 fishery improvement projects on octopus fisheries, one MSC certified fishery, another fishery in full assessment, and they just represent 0.5, 0.6% of global production. And if we use all that effort and all that resources, and don't misunderstand me, that's great, seeing all these projects and all these initiatives going on. But using all that effort and all that resources on key fisheries like Morocco, that are 10% of the global production, Mauritania, Mexico, that will change the scenario, because we will be influencing 20% of global production. And we are doing that with a group of buyers within SFP in the supply chain roundtable we have for octopus. And, and the impact you can get with just by being strategic and prioritizing is much larger, much bigger. So that's, I think, what we need to change the tide.
So I'm hearing two messages here. I mean, the first one for me is that there is a segment of the space, the problem space, for which market-driven certification, the gold standard, if you like, is entirely appropriate, and the benefits are there, and that can drive really valuable change. But there's another segment for whom certification per se, the benefits are not clear, but yet that's a very large segment for which incremental improvements that might not get you to your gold medal, but get you, to use your health analogy, everybody running around and becoming healthier. There's a huge upside to engaging and finding ways to engage in that. And it seems to me that one of the challenges we have is how we leverage the standard holders to help that incremental improvement, even where the idea of certification isn't there. That's one message I think I'm hearing from you. The second one, though, is around, let's get strategic about this. There are some key markets where a flip could lead to a very substantial change in the market drivers that would lead to a very big uptick in big fisheries around the opportunity that certification holds. And in that context, I'm very curious, Professor Kim, Korea is a pretty big market for seafood, let's be honest about it. I would love to hear your perspectives on, what do you think, how does the Korean context differ? What do we need to be bearing in mind in that market that perhaps we're not really internalizing at present?
Well, this is not just for Korea. I believe that this is some of the problems in most Asian countries. Especially in Korea, the fish stocks have been declined very significantly the last 10 years. In 1986, the catch amount was 1.7 million tons. But last year, it's less than the 1 million tons, almost 50% reduced in the catch volume. What's the problem? Is the government already spent a lot of money for increasing the managing fish stocks in the ocean with the different management instruments like a TAC, limited license program, and other technical measures. But the outcome is totally bad. So what's the problem? I always raise this issue whenever I meet the people in the government. But they always say to me that we are doing our best. But this is a time for us to change the paradigm for fisheries management. It was in the government-based, it was a government-driven fisheries management. Now we have to change it to a consumer, market-based, market-driven fisheries management. So the MSC or the ASC is one of the best tool for the consumer-based and the fisheries management. I believe that. But very unfortunately, 90% of Korean people, they don't know about this program, MSC, ASC program. 2006, Duncan Ledbetter from the MSC, he came to Korea and met me. We talked about this program. But even after the 15 years, still we don't know about this program. Even the government officials, they don't know about this program. From the last year, we had a meeting several times. I explained that this program, and this is something we need from now on. But now, it's just the government is starting to change. So we have one government official from South Korea, maybe he is here. So the issue is that how to expand this in the program, a sustainable fisheries program. We call it the eco-labeling program in the most Asian countries. Maybe China, they are exporting the seafood to European countries. They are doing very well. But in other countries like Korea, we just export the seafood to the neighboring countries, China and Japan. We don't know about this program. One of my graduate students, he surveyed Korean people. Do you know the MSC program? No, still 90% of the Korean consumers, they don't know about this program. But last year, I developed one project which is called the Gijang Seaweed ASC MSC Certification project. I was the project leader. Then I felt that, wow, it's a standard, it's crazy, too high and too strong for us to follow them. It's crazy, frankly speaking, yes. How can I expand into this standard to other fisheries and aquaculture? For example, in the social responsibility. We have no clear written contract between owners and the hired employers. No contract. But they are happy. They are very happy mutually. I'm okay without any the clear the written contract. But the standard that they need, that they require the clear and the written the contract between two persons. My point is that we already mentioned before that we have to change our attitude, and we have to change our mind. You already mentioned the incremental, step-by-step approach. I like that. Because in the real situation of the fisheries and aquaculture in Korea, we are not ready for this program. How can we go from now on? So, please listen to the real voice from real fisheries and aquaculture from different countries, like in the Asian countries. The people, also though I have the one person from the Korea, he's the leader in the most largest scale the fishery in Korea. He always asking me that, what is the benefits from eco-labeling programs? Still, I don't know. Can we have the premium price from the market? It is not clear yet. Then how can we make the fishermen, the farmers, follow this program? Still, I don't know. This is in the real situation in Korea especially. I believe that most Asian countries, they have the same situations. But I can say that the importance of sustainability of fisheries and aquaculture, we can say that, but the farmers or fishermen, they don't care about this in the program. They just want to make more money today than tomorrow. So, we need more consideration on the benefits from this program. Also, how we can expand this program to the fisheries and aquaculture. Those things we need to consider from now on. Thank you.
Yemi, last but not least, the GlobeScan analysis kind of points in particular to the importance of addressing sustainability challenges in the developing world. And I guess, again, this is about contextualizing, thinking about the context in which improvement needs to be achieved. What are the key elements of the MSC's work that you would point to in your kind of efforts to scale up engagement in that domain?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. And it's been interesting to hear the perspective of fellow speakers on the panel, and particularly what Pedro was talking about, because I guess a large proportion of those fisheries that he was talking about that are, I guess, struggling are in the global south, developing countries. And the MSC as an organization, we have been engaged with these fisheries right from the start, but we recognize that there are some challenges. We have a standard which is science-based and based on transparency, and having that kind of standard means you need data, you need information in order to be able to demonstrate that a fishery actually meets the standard. And that presents issues when you have a situation where you need science and data where a fishery might not actually be able to present that kind of data. We also have a standard that's based on the FAO Code of Conduct, and the FAO Code of Conduct represents the aspirations of the 150 so countries that developed it in terms of where fisheries should be over the next couple of years in terms of no overfishing, sustainable stocks, good management. And there are some fisheries that are not quite there. So these are challenges that we've recognized within the MSC, and we've introduced a number of initiatives to address these challenges. One of them includes mechanisms that we have in place, a risk-based approach that allows assessors to be able to assess fisheries where they don't have data, but they are operating sustainably, in which case you're able to use qualitative types of proxies to assess such fisheries, and we continue to build on those mechanisms. We have a capacity building program where we're leveraging on the experiences that we have, having worked with fisheries for the last 20 years, fisheries that have best practice management in place, and looking at how we can build the capacity of stakeholders, really drilling down into the examples of these fisheries and trying to translate these lessons across to other fisheries. We have other initiatives that includes what we refer to as our multi-fisheries project model. And this involves working with stakeholders, working with governments, facilitating a process where we bring stakeholders together to understand the fisheries in the region, identify what gaps are there, and develop, get them to facilitate the process of developing action plans and eventually implementing those action plans over time. And what's been really exciting over the last couple of years, I guess, is the kind of partnerships that we've been seeing emerge over the last couple of years with NGOs such as WWF, Sustainable Fisheries Partnerships, the Nature Conservancy, and a lot of other organizations, governments, businesses, coming together, using the MSC standard as a framework to try and understand what are the issues and how can we actually work to tease out these issues, develop action plans, identify people to work on those action plans, identify projects, and eventually get those fisheries to the point where they can become certified. So that's been really exciting to see in the last couple of years. And maybe just to sort of say lastly that while we, at the moment, we're still seeing the importance of these partnerships, we've seen a growth in the number of fisheries from the Global South participating in the MSC. Still more measured than where we want to be, but it's been a good start to see the results of these types of experiences, and obviously looking forward to increase and scale up on that activity.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I say something
Sure.
to this? We've heard some very important issues coming from our Korean friend here. A lot of the fisheries are in it for the money, not for sustainability. And sustainability is, like we've learned earlier, an issue which is not on the mind of a lot of people in the industry as well. So what we need to see is we have to do a dual approach to all this. One is certainly the industry itself and the participants in the industry working towards it, but the other side is the consumers need to be convinced that it's better for them and for their future and for the future generations that they demand sustainable fish and seafood products. If you go to the Global South and if you look at the stream of goods from there to the destinations, you learn that a lot of those end up in Asian countries. And the knowledge we've learned earlier in Asian countries about the sustainable movements, whatever they are, whether it's MSC, ASC or others, is limited. So the presence of organizations like the MSC, the ASC, in convincing consumers that sustainability is very high is mightily important. And I'm sure that consumers will go towards organizations who sell in their countries with the demand, because consumers can be vocal if they're being driven. I mean, the example of the next generation is already something. Those children today will be the consumers of tomorrow, and they will demand sustainable, not only in terms of climate, but sustainability in all areas. So what we need to try to do is getting the attention of consumers in those countries for sustainability issues. And there the industry can help, but I think we need to get in closer communication with all those who make opinions, the opinion leaders. They need to drive it, and I think that is key for all of us. Otherwise we're going to run against the wall, because we can do as much as we want if the consumers are not demanding it and are willing to pay the price for it. Because I think that is one of the issues. You mentioned, where is the benefit for me if I go for a complicated certification? Consumers need to be willing to pay for it because they know it's good for the future. So maybe we can work on this one a little bit as well.
And it seems to me there's a real challenge here for those for whom certification is a bar too far, and where yet there still needs to be a spectrum of benefits for engagement, which don't cannibalize those benefits that those who get certified enjoy, but at the same time are sufficient to encourage people into that process? That seems to be the emerging challenge for the certifying bodies. I think, Barbara, you flagged this in our conversation earlier as well, is how do we help, how do certifying bodies that hold the gold medal standard support that incremental improvement beyond? I'll come to you in a moment, Francisco, but I'd like to invite Rupert up, and we'll take some questions from the audience and from our online panel shortly. But before I do, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight one thing, is so sustainability needs to be in the DNA of companies like Thai Union, for example. We are processors. We need sustainability. We're talking about business continuity. So, and this is obviously the reason that look, Thai Union has committed over a period of 5 years, $90 million for sustainability to support fishery improvement projects. I mean, this is an enormous commitment because we understand that there's an urgent need to try to manage fisheries properly. And we've got a very distinguished gentleman right there that has proven several times that management actually does work. And this is why I'm saying, sustainability, fisheries management is in the DNA of companies like Thai Union. And as I said, I would like to highlight and reinforce this, our suppliers of raw material are effectively our partners. And sometimes, most often, they do not have the right organization, the right forum to actually implement whatever they think it is necessary, but they don't have the ways and the means to do it. And we try to help them, not that they won't be able to do it themselves, but we create the forum, we participate, we collaborate, we fund part of this initiative. So I think this is important.
I'd like to ask the audience if there is anybody in the audience who'd like to question, pick up on any of the issues that have emerged here, ask any questions of the panel, or indeed Rupert, who's joined us. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to? Yes, sir.
I'm very encouraged by Francisco's explanation of the Start again. Morris Brown, John, P&A. I was very encouraged by Francisco's explanation of Thai Union's FIPS, which we see in the region. How much of the tuna that Thai Union is processing is actually MSC as opposed to a FIP?
Overall, we are now up to 19%
and
of total purchases of Thai Union Group.
Of tuna?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Ray Hill. I will be collecting my fees from those that I point and select, by the way.
Steve, you highlighted, I think, which is the big dilemma that we see right here, which is that the big improvements in ocean health are going to come from bringing those at the bottom up. And so what is the benefit of raising the bar if that's just making very marginal increments in what are currently the best managed fisheries in the world, compared to devoting essentially all the resources to bringing the fisheries that are not even closer to the bar?
Yeah. Who would like to address that? Rupert, I'm going to give you first dibs on that. And I will again be collecting my fee.
Thank you. I was a little bit worried about being brought up at the end and having to answer all of these points and questions. Ray, that's an excellent question. It's abundantly clear that the biggest ecological and social gains will be delivered by dealing with, the fisheries that aren't operating at a MSC level of performance at this stage. And it's a conundrum for a multi-stakeholder program like the MSC. There's been from day one this tension between where the bar is set and calls for ever increasing the bar to demands for it's moving too quickly, pace of change is too great, it's becoming too complex. And it's a real challenge to navigate that, to maintain a viable program and to keep stakeholders engaged. But I agree with the tenet of what Ray is saying, is the biggest gains will be delivered if we can engage with fisheries in the global south where improvement is much needed. MSC deals with this conundrum by having a very multi-stakeholder governance model with a technical advisory board, leading fisheries scientists and supply chain experts, international board of trustees drawn from the NGO, the scientific the seafood business and the harvest sector. And a stakeholder advisory council with those same constituents, and we're guided by the board's policy on new science. Where there is new science and it is widely adopted with appropriate implementation timelines, it will be brought into the programme. But the last point I wanted to make is we have signed off on a strategic plan that talks about 20% engagement of fisheries in the MSC programme by 2020 and 30% by 2030. And the reason why we've set such ambitious goals is because of the urgency of the SDG framework and the data and statistics we've been looking at. But also, we're not saying certified. In a way, it's recognising what Ray said. We want to use our 20 years of experience working with our partners in academia, in the NGO community, in the industry, in the market, to engage and encourage improvement and leverage resources. Whether they end up going into certification is neither here nor there. It's what we want to see is improved performance.
Okay.
Can I say some?
Yes, just before you do though, Gerhard.
No, to this question.
The reason I'm holding this thing, like all good BBC presenters, is I'm waiting for somebody to tell me something. For those of you who are online and listening, and apparently there are about 200 of you, your questions are being curated and sent to me here. So if you do have any questions, please do, and we'll prioritise people who can't be with us today, if possible. But Gerhard.
Yes, sorry. There's another aspect which we should look at. When we manage to engage fisheries which improve but may not reach the bar, at least something is happening in terms of sustaining the biomass, sustaining the fisheries. If we let those fisheries which are not meeting the standards do what they want, eventually they are the grave diggers of all of them. And I think the problem which we're facing is that too many fisheries which do not meet the MSC standards or similar standards will be doing what they want for the simple financial gain which they can take out of the industry, of their doings, and by that they can ruin the perspective of everything and everybody. That is very important. So we should really engage even the hopeless cases in the hope that they can improve a little bit, and by that not destroying everything.
Other questions? We've got none online. So, question. A gentleman at the back, waving vigorously.
Good morning. My name is Sylvester Pukyong from Papua New Guinea. I have a question to my friend Robert. We are starting our Papua New Guinea MSC per se skipjack fishery, skipjack in European fishery, just this year. And we have gone through a rigorous process of assessment. We have now been listed on the public domain of MSC, and work is now being carried on for the audit and other stuff to certify. My question is, we are also a member of the PNA, Pacifical. Why is that? Because we are Papua New Guinea and we are a member of the PNA Pacifical, we are now subject to this stringent requirement of the MSC. We would have thought that we have already qualified that through Pacifical. Maybe you have that answer, please. Thank you.
I'm not sure I quite caught the full...
The acoustics are not that brilliant down here. If it's a specific question to do with certification, Pacifical, PNA, maybe we can discuss it afterwards, but I didn't quite catch the question. Okay, so
if you two could connect afterwards, please, and engage with that when you're on the hook for that. Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Sorry, yes.
Hi, I've got a question on Twitter.
Okay.
It's from Christian Absil, Director of Good Fish Foundation. Says, the big question, how do we expand the MSC program in Asian countries?
The big question, and I'm not going to answer it, so please, carry on.
Please lower the standard so that we can expand our fisheries and aquaculture.
It's so easy, isn't it? It's so easy.
Yeah.
Easy answer.
No, I think I come back to what I said earlier. Engage the consumers, make them knowledgeable, fight ignorance, fight unknowing consumers and give them the information that is available and start with that aspect, because initially the MSC started with leaders of the industry knowing what they were talking about and knowing where they had to go. Later on we saw that consumers are a vital aspect of this, the whole development as well. In Asia, I think, I'm sorry to say, consumers are the key behind it. Changing behavior of consumers.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess that engaging and giving access to information to consumers is good, but I think it's most important to engage with the retailers and with the supply chain that they are delivering these products to consumers. Because if they are not committed with that and they don't understand the benefits of it, it's not going to reach the consumers.
You're right.
So I guess that engaging supply chains in Korea, in Japan, in China, and these key markets, that will be probably the best way of starting for them to see the benefits of having sustainable fisheries and therefore sending that message to consumers.
I believe in the role of the retailers. They are very important in the expansion of the MSC program in Asian countries. For example, Korea, we have the laws in the retailers, but they don't know about this program. Just that they are competing each other, want to reduce the cost. They want to sell with the lowest the cost to the consumers. They don't worry about that, this program. So, and we have to change their mind from other international retailers. They have to push them to change their mind. I believe that is the fast way to increase this program in most Asian countries.
And the experience of Italy is perhaps one that we've just...
I mean, because I know we're short on time. So look, we need to do everything. And the whole point is we can't do it alone. And it's about partnership. It is about engaging with consumers and education. But to Gerhardt's earlier point, we have to engage the market. And MSC wants to take the 20 years of learning in both fisheries engagement and market engagement to accelerate what we do by working better together with our partners. And I'm actually broadly encouraged. We've grown 4-fold and 6-fold in Japan and China over recent years. As Nicholas said, from a very low base. But we've had some really fantastic commitments, like Aeon in Japan, a major retailer, making a 20% sourcing commitment to ASC and MSC. Alibaba, their online trading platform, Tmall, and I think Alibaba have an aspiration to get 1/3 of the retail market in China. I'm not sure over what period. They've also set a 20% MSC, ASC target. So when things move in Asia, they move very, very quickly. And where we can, we want to work with others to do the consumer education, and that's where the partnership comes in. So it's everything.
We have a couple of minutes left. Barbara, you've been listening very patiently here, and I'm very conscious as a co-convener of the ASC here. I mean, any further reflections as you think about this from an aquaculture perspective?
I mean, I think it's the approach is very similar, and what we've heard now from MSC and incremental improvements and really working with the farms that are not yet there, but really kind of like step by step taking them, using partnerships, use the markets, retailers, of course work together also with rating organizations, NGOs as implementing partners, but really having the standard as a reference. I think that's very similar basically. Yes, I also really do see that we have a joint responsibility as MSC and ASC to educate consumers about what is the right choice for seafood. Yeah.
We are out of time. I want to be respectful of you all and your other commitments and other meetings I'm sure you want to go to that no doubt start bang on 10:30, so you've got a minute to get there. It just remains for me to thank the panel very much for a very stimulating conversation. Thank you, Rupert, for joining us. Thank you for being with us. I hope you found it informative and useful. Please don't hesitate to catch any of the panelists as they leave. I'm sure they'll be happy to answer any further questions of you. That remains for me to say thank you myself, and enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers. Great.